better business, and a better life begin here. Welcome to Business is Art on True Chat with author and business consultant, Jon Umstead.
Thank you for tuning in to Business is Art. Today we've got an interesting topic. There are a number of books out there that are considered must-reads in the business world, in the professional improvement world, and we're going to be looking at one of those books today. It's called Good to Great. You've probably heard of it. Perhaps you haven't read it, but we're going to actually review this book and go through a few of the highlights from it today. And with us today, our guest is Mike Smith. Mike's actually a returning guest to Business is Art. He was on some time ago. He is a CPA. He's with Goldshot, Lamb & Hobbs. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
I appreciate you joining us again and going through this, and we'll talk a little bit about why you particularly are going through this book review with us. But before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, if you would, please?
Well, certainly, John. It's good to talk with you again. And I've lived in Dayton all my life. Pretty much know the history of the community. And, Dayton's one of those towns where, you're bound to run into people that you meet. It just kind of works that way. So it is kind of a small town if you think about it. And I've been in accounting for about 29 years. Started out my background is in cost accounting for about the first 8 or so years, and really enjoyed that. Really loved the idea behind, a business understanding what its cost is, and the value of that. And then I spent about 2 years or so where I was a controller. Was a finance manager for an electrical contractor for a couple of years, and I've been in public accounting since 2000. So about 30 years in accounting.
Mike, I know you've got a good story to tell about how you actually landed in this profession. And so it's not really part of our agenda today, but it's a good story. Would you mind sharing that?
Both of my degrees are from Wright State University, and when I graduated the first time, fresh out of high school, went into college, I was pretty certain I wanted to be a journalist. And I had gotten a degree in mass communication. Well, I got about my junior year, and I really thought that, man, I just don't know if journalism's really going to fit the bill for me, but I don't really know if I want to change careers or not. So I went to see the counselor, and as I was talking to her, she was saying, let's look at your transcript to date. And so my journalism classes, I was getting, I want to say B's and C's. I was kind of an average student in those classes in my core. And she started asking me, she says, well, why are you taking, you're allowed to take electives, but, why were you taking Calculus 1 and Calculus 2? And I told her, I said, well, I just really enjoyed the first one so much, and I just kept on going. And she says, well, it's weird to me, but here's what I'm seeing is in all your core journalism classes, you're getting B's and C's, but you're getting A's in all these math electives. So maybe you might want to consider adding a business minor. So that's exactly what I did. I took an extra year to finish my business minor, which is the core of your accounting, management, and finance classes. And 6 months after that, I got a great job in accounting. I started working in cost, and I've been there ever since. So, and I've never come across anything in accounting, pretty much anything, from just the basic stuff to real high level stuff. I've never come across anything that I didn't like. And I remember my wife telling me at some point in time, she said, well, people don't just like accounting. They usually either love it or hate it. So you seem to be in the love it category. Right. So do whatever you got to do. And that's when I went back. I got my degree in accounting from Wright State. I sat for the CPA exam. And like I said, I've been in that ever since.
You just never know. You have to keep an open mind. And here's a case where those electives really serve their purpose. Part of the reason they're out there is just to expose you to things beyond the major that you're in. And for you, it popped up, what really truly was your passion. So It's a great story. I appreciate it. So, Mike, what is it that you do as a CPA, and do you have any particular areas of focus in your work?
Well, that's a good question. Well, Goldshot Lamb and Homs is what I would consider a fairly small to medium-sized firm. We have less than 20 people. But the average person that's been with the firm has over 25 years of experience. So we're kind of small but mighty. And in a smaller size firm like that, well, you pretty much wind up doing everything. So as a firm, we do about 1,200, close to 1,200 individual 1040 returns. We do several hundred corporate returns. We do a lot of business planning and advising with a lot of focus on providing value to clients. We do audits, reviews, and compilations. Kind of our niche areas are doctors' offices, manufacturing concerns. We also do a good deal, and a growing area of our practice is churches and nonprofits. And they need a lot of help.
Right. Right.
They really do.
We often forget that they are businesses as well. They've got a lot of the same concerns as any other business. They're concerned with top line, bottom line, employees, staffing, schedules, all of the same trappings of a regular business.
Yeah, and in some ways they're a little bit more complicated too, because they have a compliance aspect that is really hard for them, and generally speaking, they have volunteers. You go in a $10 million company, you've got a whole accounting staff. You go in a church or a nonprofit and, they've got a very small, very slim staff. So they need a lot of help.
Yep, for sure. Well, I appreciate you being out there and being one of those resources that they can turn to. So let's start talking about book reviews and why you actually are on the show, coming back onto the show to do a book review. Is that you do these book reviews for yourself. You read a book and you write a review and document it, keep records of it. How did you get started doing that?
Well, that's a good question. I've always done my own book reviews. It just has to do with the way that I learn things, John. I feel like when I do these book reviews, it just cements the concepts in my mind. So I like that portion of it. I like to feel like, that I have these takeaways. And in addition, if someone, sounds interested in a book that I'm telling them about and I've written a review, then I like to share the review with them, and maybe that'll inspire them to read it.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, in addition to the sharing, which is wonderful, it's also really good for you, the reader, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many books I've read that I've forgotten I've even read them, so let alone the content. And I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure that's a lot of people are in that same boat. And, somebody will mention a book. Oh, I'm sure you've read this book. And it's like, yeah, vaguely sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But don't ask me to tell you what it says. So it's a great idea. Great idea. All right. Hey, folks, if you want to join our discussion, you can find True Chat on social media at TrueChat.org or reach out to me directly on Twitter at Jon Umstead. We would love to hear from you, hear what you think of today's episode, past episodes, any thoughts you have for future episodes, things you'd like us to cover. Would love to hear from you. So start that discussion with us, if you would, please. So let's get back here with Mike. We're going to be talking about Good to Great is the book we're going to be reviewing. We haven't quite got there yet. Doing a little background check on Mike and moving on into the topic. So let's do so. So today we are reviewing Good to Great by Jim Collins. And can you give us a quick synopsis of the book?
Well, sure. The book is a culmination of a research project conducted by Jim Collins and his research team. The team conducted a study of publicly traded companies in an attempt to kind of determine what makes some companies make the jump from just being generally good to outstanding or great. These companies generally generated cumulative stock returns that beat the general stock market by an average of 7 times over a period of 15 or more years. So it wasn't just a fluke. Yeah. So the research included what he considered were comparison companies, which were, companies that were in the same industry as the great companies, so that they could kind of show, kind of learn what the differences were between those two. So the researchers eventually narrowed it down to 11 good to great companies. And then the book is a synthesis of all that research.
The material that's covered in the book, obviously it's looking at a little bit bigger companies because they're publicly traded, but can the lessons learned and the things that they found through the research, can they be applied to small and startup businesses as well?
Absolutely. I look at it from a lot of different perspectives because, this is just something it's got great information about good leadership. It's got great information about how to run an effective company, how to have good, strong employee relationships. It's a very entrepreneurial book, so it's hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
It's very helpful for people on any level. If you even just work for a company, it's helpful.
So I imagine you partially answered this question, but why else might this book be a must read, and really for whom?
Well, like I said, John, it's very, it's good for anybody. It doesn't matter if you are the owner of a company or if you work for a company. The methodologies and the takeaways that are from this book, they're very effective.
Can you give us some examples of some things that anyone might be able to apply?
Absolutely. So one of the main things that I like about this is, and there's a lot of other leadership books that kind of point this out too, is that great leaders lead with questions, not answers. And until I read that, I really didn't take home the fact that if I'm going to take a leadership position, I have to have all the answers. There was just this fear that I have to know and I have to direct people to where to go. The reality is you surround yourself with good people with a heart for what and a passion for what needs to be done and lead them by asking questions. So that was, that's a really relief. That's a relief for me anyways. And one of the things that the book points out, and it's one of the big takeaways, is you think that these good leaders are these, gregarious, charismatic characters, very outgoing, extroverted people. What the book kind of says is that good to great, great companies are generally run by very introverted, introspective people, not these gregarious leaders, and so that kind of leads into what I'm saying there with leading with questions, not answers, because if you've got a gregarious leader that's going to jump in and start saying, hey, here's where we need to go, that's often going to deter people, from facing brutal realities and making poor decisions. So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of leaders, maybe perhaps the majority of leaders, forget that and feel as you did until you read this book and others like it. You do feel like I'm the leader. I've got to have the answers, and by golly, I'm going to let everybody know what the answers are. And it happens all the time. And I'm teaching a course right now on the fundamentals of human resources management, and one of the things that we were talking about was this very subject. And I commented to the class that sometimes the hardest thing for a leader to do is to just shut up, just be quiet, listen to.
You got it. That's absolutely the truth. And, until you get that point, there's this, I don't know, it builds up inside of you and you're thinking, I need to provide direction. I need to, tell them where to go.
Yeah.
Another guy's Bob Proctor wrote the book ABCs of Success. And he talks about that too. He says, the moment that you say something as simple as you're right, you've pretty much dropped any possibility of looking for a better solution. At one point in time, Alexander Bell built the phone, and that was a pretty doggone good invention. But if everybody would have just agreed that that was the best we could do, we'd still be running around with corded phones, So, that's the other part about questions and answers,
Hey, Mike, let's take a moment here and remind our listeners that all the podcasts on our network pursue a common goal True Chat's mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And if you have any ethical concerns with today's episode, please email ethics@truechat.org. Again, that's ethics@truechat.org. Let's get back to the topic at hand. And before we do, also remind our listeners to please go out to social media. Find us at truechat.org, or you can tweet me directly at Jon Umstead. On Twitter, we want to hear from you. Get your comments, questions into us, if you would, please. Let's start a discussion. Let's get back to this discussion with Mike Smith. He's a CPA with Goldshot, Lamb and Hobbs, and we are talking about the book, Good to Great. So, Mike, thanks for sharing. That's a pretty big and important takeaway, is to lead by listening. What are some other great lessons that you've learned from this book?
Well, a good portion of the book talks about good to great companies creating a hedgehog concept. And so when we're talking about that, it's basically simplifying a complex world into a single organizing idea, a basic principle or concept that unifies and guides everything. Now, obviously, I'm just kind of reading that from, I wanted to make sure that I got his definition of it, but how that works and how I think that it's a great takeaway is that, and there's other books that kind of lead, that talk about it. They tend to refer to that as like a core value. You develop a core value and what it is that you do. If you look at a company, like the classic example is you look at Steve Jobs and Apple, and you look at IBM. And you look at Bill Gates and you look at the two different things. When you compare those two companies, the PC market tend to explain everything with what our features are. And Apple said, how is this going to affect your life? How are you going to be able to use this technology? And that's a lot about, that says a lot about what the hedgehog concept really is. And so when you have that core values, that set of core values, and you know what your organization's about, it's easier, for example, to hire people because, it's easy to train for skill set. It's very difficult to hire people, that get it, that understand what your core values are.
Yeah, you raise a really good marketing point as well. I believe there are some people that just get it and it's just natural to them. But, when you were talking about technology companies in particular, kind of leading with features and functions, that still goes on a lot. It's predominant in the technology world. And I'm an example of someone that knows better. I know better than to do that. And yet I find myself doing it as well until someone will come along and coach me and say, hey, get off the features and functions. Let's talk about what it's really doing for people. And you just kind of go back into that old mode unless you have that constant reminder. At least some people, anyways, and I'm an example of one of those types of people.
I think it happens to everybody, John. I think it's too easy because from our perspective, we're just trying to sell all the features and all the things that we put into a product. But then, I correlate it a lot. It's easier to correlate for me for a nonprofit. And I tell my nonprofits this all the time that, if you go out, like, for example, with the Red Cross, and you're showing how you're changing people's lives that have been affected by a hurricane, you don't need to recruit volunteers because you're going to have them lining up at your door. You're not going to have to really hit people hard for financial contributions because people are going to want to help. And so part of it is just connecting with that purpose with people and being a good storyteller.
Yeah, and that's a great example as well because you think about it. Red Cross as an example, and helping people. The commercials that ultimately end up asking for help, to help or donate to the Red Cross or volunteer to help, don't go through hey, we're going to get your dollar. And with this dollar, first we're going to go out and we're going to buy that. And then we're going to truck it over using this, type of service. And we're going to get it here and we're going to put it in this warehouse. And then we're going to distribute it this way, right? We don't talk about the features and functions of that service. We talk about what it's really doing to help people. And the same is true of business or products, anything that we're trying to provide. And it's kind of that old axiom, right? That, you fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. So if you focus on what is the problem that you're trying to solve or help people solve, and don't get so hung up on what is the solution that you're proposing, that's the features and functions. The features and functions are the solution, right? So stay away from that. Stick to the problem.
Oh, it's a lot like your software, Plain Canvas, shameless plug.
Yeah, thanks.
But, but honestly, I've seen that program and basically, it's kind of taking the methodical part of it out of it and getting to the heart of, why you're doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of fields to put that stuff in there. The dashboards and things are just to let you know that you're on target with it, but the software has a lot of ability to kind of put in there what you're passionate about and what you want to see happen because of, as a result of, putting that effort into your business.
How, Mike, have you applied some of the lessons from this book to your own life, personal or professional?
That's a good question. One of the concepts that keeps coming up with me is he talks about good leaders use the mirror versus the window effect. And for some people, I think that's probably, they've heard this a lot. So what the mirror versus the window effect says is that a good leader will use each one of those in the right appropriate circumstance. So for example, when things are going particularly well, whether sales are up, productivity's up, whatever it is, they will use the mirror to look outside themselves and say, it's because we have great people. It's because we have an incredible market right now for our product. And it's because people out there are receiving it and want it. And that's a great thing. And then by the same token, when things go bad, they use the mirror to reflect upon themselves. And they say, this is where we went wrong. And I claim responsibility for that. And when you get it, when you understand that mirror versus the window, you see it all the time. And how many business owners that you know of, they run into a snag and they're immediately like, well, we can't help it. The economy sucks, pardon my language, but the economy sucks and it's all, and I can't seem to get anybody motivated to get moving around here. And you hear that, or you talk, your sports teams are a good example of that. When they, when they get it right and they win the World Series, whatever it is, they're going to say, we did it as a team. It's because everybody outside of me came together and we made this happen. And if you're talking to the losing team, they're going to say, well, look, I take full responsibility of this, and it had a lot to do with my leadership and what I'm doing. So that mirror versus the window thing is probably, that's up there. And like I said, once you get it, you see it in other people and you see it in yourself. If you wind up using, if you get it and you use those excuses where it's like, oh man, the economy sucks. That's why it went to, heck, then you hear it in yourself and you're like, oh, I got to stop. I got to correct that behavior. I got to correct the way I say that. So that's probably the most powerful lesson that I learned from that.
Well, I think we all fall back on that. It's, if you aren't accustomed to doing that, it takes a few times practicing doing it before it begins to get a little bit more natural. But there's still times, Mike, at least in my life, where I don't want to do that, right? I want to blame something else. I don't want to take responsibility, but it's my place to take the responsibility. And sometimes it's a drag.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, it's a drag when you see it in the people you work for or with. It's difficult to just be like, you know what? you really ought not to do that. You're setting an example for people, So if you're blaming other people, that's not good employee relations.
But it does become easier with practice, and it is a great habit to be in because it's true. It's not just a habit, right? It is true. If you are the leader or aspire to be the leader, you share in the glory, and you accept responsibility for anything that is anything south of glory.
Yes, definitely there. Been there. So.
South of glory. That'll be my next book, South of Glory.
I'd like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've covered a lot of territory. It's a great book. There's a lot more to it. So before we wrap things up, I would like to ask if there's anything else from the book that you definitely want to share before we wrap.
Yeah. My final advice on that would be just to, talk about the value of reading. There's so many good books out there. And what I find is that, Solomon says, not much new underneath the sun. So a lot of it's a regurgitation of, and after you read a lot of these books, it seems like there's a lot of concepts that kind of pop out of the woodwork on that. But there's a lot of value to reading business books. I just eat this stuff up for lunch. One of the things that I started doing not too awful long ago, I kind of discovered this bookstore over in Kettering called Murphy's, but there's also Half Price Books, Second Charles. There's a bunch of used bookstores out there. Murphy's has a particularly large section for business books. That's why I go there. Most of them are about $3. So I wind up just buying $15, $20 worth of books and just giving them away to people and just saying, here, try this out, see what you think, and, there's a lot of books out there, obviously Good to Great's one of my favorites. And I appreciate you asking me about that. Five Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a Pat Lenciani books, one of my favorites. Traction by Gina Wickman, Scaling Up, Vern Harnish. Also read a really great book called The Deming Management Method. It was written about Edward Deming, kind of the father of statistical process control. And that was an amazing book. So, and The Goal, Eli Goldrat's one of my favorites as well. So these are all great books that just kind of, I think that's what I would just say is, just spend some time doing it. I take about a half hour a day. If you do the math on that, based on the average reading skill, that equates to about 150 page books in a year.
A couple of weeks ago, we had Tim Burgess on the show, and he was talking about Think and Grow Rich. And it had been a long time since I'd opened up that book. So in fact, I don't even have a copy of it anymore. So I went ahead and ordered a copy of it, and just beginning to open that back up again. But it's another one of those classics that's out there that is a very powerful book. And like you said, highly encourage everybody to get out there and read some of them.
And you got, tons of libraries. You've got used bookstores. I mean, you can certainly buy them, but, there's, and I would recommend, if you have a library of books, then just start opening them up to sharing them with people.
Well, hey, Mike, maybe we can have you back on sometime, and heck, maybe we make this a regular segment, book reviews with Mike, something like that. How about that?
Sounds wonderful, John. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here and sharing your review of Good to Great with us. Appreciate it. Where can people find you or your work or any special cause that you might like to mention?
It's Goldshot, Lamb and Hobbs. It's www.glhcpas.com. And I've been a long-time supporter of the Red Cross, mentioned it earlier. Actually been on the board for about 10 years now. Pretty active in terms of, you may have seen me on Channel 2 a couple of weeks ago when we were doing the telethon for Florence. And, I just really, I've been a big fan of the Red Cross for a long time. And the more that I hear about how they're impacting people's lives, the more that I want to continue doing it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. We're going to wrap things up now. We want to remind our listeners that they can listen to True Chat podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere the fine podcasts are found. For Business is Art on True Chat, I'm your host, John Umstead. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.
Looking for responsible media? Listen on demand to politics, sports, and more with the True Chat app or at truechat.org. Beyond the horizon, there is trustworthy media at True Chat.